In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiends. I do horror-related things on the internet, and happy holidays. Hail Santa and all of that fun stuff. I did recently upload my video of Blackbeard that I told you I was going to be releasing back in August, but then that didn't happen because school and a lot of other things happened in my life. But I did finally get around to editing it, so that is out now and up on my channel, and I'm very glad that it finally is because it has been hanging over me a little bit. I know it shouldn't be because I do this for fun, but there is something very satisfying about finally having that done after all of this time. Point being, I am finally making content again. I don't know when this video is going to come out because I do still have other obligations that I need to work on, and that will make it hard to finish editing. But I do plan on getting this out sometime during the holiday season. I am currently filming on the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, to a lot of people, and I can guarantee that it is coming out in the holiday season. I can't guarantee you anything, but I'm gonna do my damnedest to make sure I get this out probably before Christmas, at least before I go back to school in January. So, point being, I'm back, I'm making content. You're probably watching this in late November or sometime in December, hopefully. Anyway, hi. Today's review is not going to be what I would call regularly scheduled programming, if there was such a thing on my channel ever at any point in time, but I do have more Flights of Fancy prepared. I'm going to do a ranking of all of those kind of maddening Hallmark miniseries I reviewed, and I'm going to get back to reviewing more horror movies from cheap box sets I bought at flea markets and thrift stores. But first, I actually had a requested review back in October, and that request was from none other than Steve Rudzinski, the director of this film, who also sent me the screener for Carousel II back last October and was kind enough to send me this screener. I did not end up filming a review until now, partly because I am a seasonal stickler, and unlike Steve, I tend to prefer putting out holiday content around December rather than super early, but Steve does whatever the hell Steve wants. Mostly it was because I was drowning in schoolwork and a bunch of other shit I was dealing with. All of that said, Steve was kind enough to send me a screener for this film. It is perfect for the holiday season, and I am reviewing it now. And that film is Amityville Christmas Vacation. This is a film that obviously came out in 2022, and obviously, because I just said it, was directed by Steve Rudzinski, who is known for directing the Carousel films, as well as the films in the Meowie franchise, which spans a variety of holidays. There's a Meowie Christmas, a Meowie Halloween, Meowie St. Patrick's Day. Steve loves cute cats, and I don't blame him, but I have yet to see the Meowie movies. Maybe I'll remedy that at some point. As well as Red Christmas, not the one with, I think, Dee Wallace in it, that as far as I know has icky pro-lifey connotations. No, this is the low-budget one that I almost watched instead, about a girl who likes murdering people. I ended up not watching either, but maybe I'll remedy that at some point by probably watching Steve's movie, not the other one. But regardless, those are things Steve has made. I will try to give links below to where you can support his assorted content. He also stars in this movie alongside Eileen Isley, who is also in the Carousel movies, the Meowie movies, and such things as Captain Z and the Terror of Leviathan, Everyone Must Die, and Super Task Force 1. It stars Garrett Hunter, who is a voice actor in the animated series RWBY, and is an actor in the Mega 64 franchise. It stars Marci Leigh or Leigh, let me know how you pronounce that, please, who was also in Carousel II, A Meowy St. Patrick's Day, and is also a cosplayer and a baker who has a website called Cooking Up Cosplay. And I will try to link that in the description as well so that you can support Marci's content because I think it's really cool. And this film stars Autumn Ivy, who was in Revenge of Zoe, Miss Simon, and appears to either have voiced or is going to be voicing Hecate in the Lore Olympus TV series, according to IMDb, and voices the character, I believe, of Valerie in the Mortuary Assistant video game. So all of that is pretty cool. And the plot of this film, as the title would suggest, is kind of a parody of the Amityville franchise slash Amityville movie knockoff trend, as well as Christmas specials. And it follows Wally Griswold, who wins a exclusive vacation in sunny Amityville at this one quaint little house where he has obviously been set up and is being haunted by a ghost. And Wally's reaction to being confronted with a murderous ghost who has killed the previous victims of this agency that sent him this little letter is the most logical one, which is to fall hopelessly in love with her. And things get interesting from there. So the score for this film was done by Mike Treblecock, who I've talked about on here before. He did the score for Carousel II. He did the score for The Abominations of Frankenstein, which was my last Heart of the Night review. Great movie, great score. And has done a variety of things for a lot of other films, including such prestige pieces as Ouija Shark 2. And his score for this is more or less what I would expect from a hybrid of holiday special parody and horror parody. So it's very melodramatic in all kinds of ways, from like super sparkly, jingly, happy sleigh bells stuff that is super upbeat and stereotypically Christmassy, little jingly melodies, lots of sleigh bells in the background. And then on the flip side of that, you've got the very overtly horror stuff that is just super drony and dissonant and creepy. Again, this isn't a score where I could really pick out themes per se, but it served the film and it really served to heighten the over-the-top nature of certain scenes, especially when it was kind of dissonant with what was going on. Like, you'd have really horrific score going on and a really horrific thing happening, but Wally reacting to it in a completely unexpected way. Or you'd have a super jingly, happy sequence with Wally and this ghost enjoying themselves, only there's something a little strange and off about it, but the music doesn't acknowledge that, and the juxtaposition of that is fun. Visually speaking, this is, like a lot of Steve Rudzinski's work, very low budget, but I think with what it has, it does some really fun stuff. Notably, there is a lot of like what I would call Argento lighting. It's mostly just like one solid color of very intense lighting combined with sometimes just on its own, but sometimes mixed with some other light. But it's the very sort of intense lighting and fun playing with color that you see in things like Suspiria, which is why people talk about Argento lighting now. It's also reminiscent of stuff like Creepshow. But the really fun thing is, in a lot of the scenes, particularly featuring the ghost haunting the house where Wally is that it's Argento lighting in red and green, which still looks dramatically spooky, but also is in Christmas colors. And it's used for the creepy scenes involving her and also the wholesome scenes involving her. And that was really fun. There is also later some lighting using that same style in different colors, but I liked that they used the red and the green, particularly for the ghost haunting this house. That was fun. There were definitely some visual gags that were very well constructed. In particular, there's one where I think it's a garage or just a dark room, but like Wally turns out the lights and there's just these two what appear to be red eyes in there, and it's like that looks weird. And he flips the lights on and there's nothing, and then he flips them back out, and it's what like at first glance looks like more eyes, but they're in Christmas colors and they are Christmas lights or the eyes of something that look like Christmas lights. But it's a fun, again, mixture of horror tropes with Christmas aesthetics. And I should get it out of the way right now that I'm a good ways into this review. I'm not actually familiar with the plot line of Amityville Horror. Like, I know stuff in passing, but I've never actually watched Amityville Horror or any of its sequels, and I'm not really familiar with any of the movies that got progressively more absurd later on with the whole Amityville trend. So I probably missed a lot of the more explicit references to anything Amityville related besides the one house, because everybody knows what the Amityville house looks like, and that was fun. But I will probably have to watch at least the original Amityville Horror and then come back and watch this if I want to get some of the other jokes. But there was still a lot for me to enjoy otherwise. So if you, like me, have never seen Amityville Horror in your entire life, you're still going to have fun with this. And also on the visual side, this does something that many low budget films do. And sometimes it's eye roll worthy, sometimes it's delightful. This time it was kind of both, which was the use of obvious stock footage, because everything else is so just very grounded and handheld. But then there are these sweeping shots that look like something that, given the obvious budgetary limitations of everything else, could not have possibly happened. So in some other things, that would make me roll my eyes, but it's very clear that the filmmakers here are just having fun. They know things look fake, but they don't really give a shit. And that's not to say they're not putting effort into this, because it does have a lot of heart. But if things look a little bit tacky, that's kind of the aesthetic of this movie. So in a lot of ways, it just adds to the sort of obvious stock footage Ed Wood charm of the whole thing. Story and writing wise, this takes a page from the other Steve Rosinski films I'm familiar with, being the two Carousel films. I do need to see Steve's other stuff, but the writing style is just very broad humor and just very obvious. Like, there's dramatic irony going on in a sequence, but the characters, particularly Wally, are being played to be so deliberately stupid that it's ridiculous. So, for example, there's a scene where the ghost, who I should mention, her name is Jessica, is getting kidnapped by a ghost hunter, and Wally walks back into the room, takes off his headphones, and is like, boy, I sure do like listening to Christmas music at maximum high volume and noise-canceling headphones. I'm sure nothing could have possibly happened to Jessica during the time while I was listening to this music. And it's just like painfully obvious to the point of being hilarious, and sometimes that can be tiring and just make you want to groan. But the way it's delivered, especially by Steve as Wally, just works in this movie for me. And that seems to just be a hallmark of Steve's sense of humor, is just really broad, obvious comedy. And another hallmark that I've really noticed is just long takes, things that linger longer than you're expecting them to. There's an opening packing sequence where Wally's like, I won this ticket to this thing that's definitely not a death trap. And then he starts packing everything he can possibly fit into this one suitcase. And it's like this kind of sequence I'd expect the credits to be rolling over and anything else, but it's just him standing there cramming as many Christmas things into this one suitcase as he possibly can, to the point of absurdity. And I did kind of start to zone out at some point, but it was still really funny, and I could tell that he was having fun making that sequence and acting the physical comedy of trying to fit everything in this suitcase, so that was fun. Another way in which that lingering as humor is expressed is through just the way the film is edited, which usually those kinds of edits would feel like a lot of care was not given. Like, I tend to try to cut things so that they don't linger awkwardly in my review videos, but that lingering awkwardly where it holds a little bit too long seems to be very deliberately done in this. Like, there's a scene where Wally is talking to his cat Whiskers, and he's just like, I don't even remember exactly what he says in the sequence, but it's something to the effect of, I'm leaving and you're gonna behave and be able to hold down the fort, right? And he just sort of lingers there and smiles with this very kind of exaggerated, expectant face, just for way too long. And that can sometimes grate on me, but it worked here. It was just ridiculous and obviously ridiculous enough that it was fun. Like, I don't know. Your mileage is going to vary with this depending on what your actual sense of humor is, but a lot of the stuff in here, even though the joke was painfully obvious, was funny to me, and sometimes it was funny to me because it was painfully obvious. And yet another sort of lingering as humor that I've noticed that Steve does is how long he can extend a joke. And obviously, like, that was a thing with that opening sequence, but like, if you watch my review of Carousel the Second, there is the way that that film keeps coming back to the joke of the kidnapping Nazi character who is trying to pose as somebody else in order to kidnap either Robbie or Duke, but like, he's got these long extended monologues about his childhood as whatever profession he's pretending to be, that nobody asked for and is not helping him to conceal his cover, but everybody somehow buys them. But they go on for way too long, and there's a ton of them that they just keep coming back to. I got a similar vibe from the gag we have with Jessica in this movie, which is that Wally is introduced to Jessica by like wandering into a room and being confronted with this like horrific ghost just suddenly appearing in the kitchen. And the first time he's like found some cookies on the counter and he's munching on them, and he turns around and Jessica's there kind of snarling over him in the spooky green Christmas Argento lighting. And he starts to react in the way you'd expect. And he's like, but then he's just like, I am so sorry. I did not realize these were your cookies. I just had one of them. Here you go. And like hands her the cookies. And she's just kind of standing there like, I'm a ghost. What the fuck am I supposed to do with these? And then that happens again. Like, he goes into the bathroom and she appears and he's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were using the bathroom. And then she appears like with an actual knife covered in blood. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're covered in blood. You must cut yourself with that knife. Like, it's always this embarrassment or concern that you're not necessarily expecting, except that by the third or fourth time it happens, you're totally expecting it. And part of the humor is that the joke just keeps getting dragged out. That is one instance where it doesn't quite work for me as funny. Like, I enjoy watching it because I can tell that they had fun writing that joke and dragging it out as long as they could. But similarly to in Carousel the Second, dragging out a joke for that long, as fun as that can be to write and perform, and like, there might be other people who think that's hilarious, but for me, holding the joke for that long just did stop being funny at a certain point. But again, humor is subjective. That just didn't work for me. Shortly after, like in the scene where Wally is confronted by Jessica, who's holding a knife, like they reach this agreement and she's like, no, nobody ever actually thinks about me. I usually just kill everybody who comes in here. And he's like, huh? And she's like, nothing. And like, he's still completely oblivious to the fact that he's in a murder house for the vast majority of this film. But they keep talking and it's kind of poignant in a ridiculous way. And at some point it turns into like them deciding to go on a date together. And I thought that was really funny because like, whereas the original Amityville is like, you need to get out of this house, the tagline is, for God's sake, get out. In this movie, there is this idea of getting out of the house, but it's just Wally telling Jessica, you need to get out of the house more, and her being like, I can't, I'm a ghost, and him being like, have you tried? And her being like, I don't know. But it's as opposed to like the horrific warning of get out of the house. It's just like, you should get out more, or even, will you go out with me? So I thought that was a fun inversion of the idea of getting out that is in at least the promotional material for the original Amityville. And like, this movie is not that deep, but bottom line, I thought that was fun. Like, deliberate or not, that was fun. And then again, there's a drawn out date montage, except nobody else can see Jessica, so it's just Wally walking around holding nobody in a bunch of like Christmassy locations. They walk down the decorated streets, they go to the mall. He kisses somebody who's not there. Even compared to the montage of Jessica trying to kill Wally, that didn't do a ton for me. But again, it's kind of charming. I can tell the filmmakers had fun making it. I don't really give a shit. And then there's a little scene of them by the Christmas tree. Wally gives Jessica this little ghost toy, and she's like, "Is this supposed to be me?" And Wally's like, "No, you're even cuter." And it's cheesy, but so's the whole movie. But that moment especially was actually really cute because one, the little plush toy of the ghost is adorable. I don't know if it's like a Beanie Baby or what it is, but it's a little stuffed ghost toy, and Jessica's reaction is like how I would react if you give me any cutesy thing that's shaped like a bat or is a toy bat or has bats on it. If you do that, my heart melts instantly, and it's very much the same vibe there. Naturally, Jessica gets Wally a Christmas sweater with cats on it, because what else was gonna happen there? And then one of my favorite jokes slash references in this whole thing happens. I probably should have said spoiler warning at the beginning of this because I'm going to spoil every joke and reference that's in this, but I will try to put in text at the beginning of this video a spoiler warning. So that's just for future Anthro to edit. But shortly after the gift unwrapping, Jessica and Wally lean in for a kiss, and then Wally just, in the most like panicked little voice ever, just goes, "You know, mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it," because they're under the mistletoe. And Jessica like immediately backs away and is like, "What the heck?" And he's like, "I thought I read that somewhere once." And it's a very obvious reference to that one scene or those two scenes in Batman Returns, which is a Christmas go-to for me. And it's made even better by the fact that after saying that and after Jessica kind of runs off, Wally just goes, "Now, why would I say something like that? What kind of asocial weirdo says that to someone?" And it's just a little subtle Batman diss, or not actually that subtle, but it's funny. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie. Plotline wise in this, like, there is a plot, but there's also things that just kind of happen because they're funny, and also points of conflict that I don't quite understand. Like, Jessica goes to like her online ghost counselor, or like, I don't know if it's her boss or what the arrangement there is, but she's like a paranormal consultant, or like she's a caseworker. That's what she is. She's like Juno from Beetlejuice if the Maitlands were being employed to actually kill the Dietzes and Juno was way younger and used Zoom. They wind up talking and she's like, "Yeah, I've got a problem with this job arrangement. You know, I'm this doom spirit who's supposed to be killing the residents of this house, but I'm in love with the resident of this house right now." All the suggestions that the caseworker gives are all kind of like weird paranormal variants on self-help ideas. And it's one of the threads in the movie that I don't quite get, because it's just like, is the ghost getting paid? Is Jessica getting paid to off these people, or is she here because she's a soul who's not at rest? We later find out that the lady who sent the gift certificate, whatever, to Wally to set him up is actually working for Jessica and has been supplying her with victims until she decided, like, you know, I actually kind of enjoy this. But I don't feel like Jessica's employed by anybody else. Like, she's a restless spirit who's doing this because she has unfinished business. But if she just wants to kind of stay there and have this paranormal relationship between life and death with Wally, like, what is wrong about their arrangement exactly? Like, I'm getting nitpicky about the lore in a movie called Amityville Christmas Vacation, which I don't really have any right to do. I'm just like, I like world building, and the ideas in this movie are fun. There were plot things that I was just like, I'm not really sure what you're trying to do here. So that's all I'm saying. Like, that sequence was still fun, but I was just kind of confused as to what's the story here and what's the joke here exactly. I didn't get it, but it was still fun. Also, in that Zoom call session was referenced something called the Necomyaunicon, which I'm assuming is a like cutesy kitty variant on the Necronomicon. I'm sure that was a throwaway line, but goddammit, put that thing in one of your movies, Steve, because I actually want to see what it looks like. And then in another moment of me not getting the joke at all, Wally, who I should mention is a police officer, I'll get more into characters in just a minute, but Wally calls up one of his friends because he's going to abuse the police system in order to rescue Jessica. And the biggest joke with this one character is just that he's miserably alone but doesn't want to admit it. So he's just on the phone being like, yes, I'm here on Christmas Eve with my family, who are very real and who I did not make up at all. My child took his first steps today. And he's actually very obviously alone and just sitting in front of his TV eating Twinkies. But the other thing that happens right before Wally calls him is he's just sitting there and he's like, I love the show, Coach. And I love this one particular character. He's a rascal. And like, I was like, there's got to be some kind of joke there. So I looked up the show, I looked up the character, but like, I'm sure if I'd actually watched Coach, like, I might get the joke, but I haven't, so I didn't. But shortly after that, there was a joke that I actually loved, which is that Wally asks this guy if he can hunt down this one person who has kidnapped Jessica, and he's like, he's a spirit snagger. And he's just like, Spirit Snagger? Isn't that the team who has the gorilla? And Wally's like, no, 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 no. That's the other one. And as someone who grew up watching Ghostbusters, the animated series, not the real Ghostbusters, the cartoon, but Ghostbusters, the animated series, the one based on the earlier show with the team that has the gorilla, and who then later ended up watching the actual Ghostbusters movies and just being a little bit confused. Once I figured it out, that was a whole thing. But anyway, as someone who grew up kind of in the middle of getting confused between the two Ghostbusters franchises, this little joke was fun. A little before that, Wally has a parallel scene to Jessica's call with her supernatural caseworker, where he calls this paranormal consultant who he's never called before and is just some eccentric old dude with a beard who is played by someone who is clearly not actually an eccentric old dude with a beard. And like, a lot of the questions and the back and forth is very much the same conversation that Jessica had with the caseworker, just from the opposite perspective of, as opposed to I'm a ghost in love with a human, it's I'm a human and I'm in love with a ghost. And the first question both the caseworker and the paranormal consultant asks is like, boy ghost or girl ghost, or just boy or girl in the case of Jessica's call. But as someone who got asked if I was boy or a girl multiple times at my summer job by a bunch of small children, after having recently come out as gender fluid, those were fun memories to revisit. But it is funny that that's one of their first questions. And I do love, legitimately, that Wally's response is girl ghost. At least I think she's a girl. I don't really know how ghost genders work, but she uses she, her pronouns. Like, it's a little ham-fisted, but so is the whole movie, and like, normalized pronouns in anything just makes me happy. And then I got confused about world building in a place where I have no business to get confused about world building again, because Wally is just like, I'm gonna miss you, Jessica. I guess you'll be headed off to ghost heaven, or to, I guess, to ghost hell, based on however many people you killed. And then it's just like, she's a dead spirit. Like, heaven and hell in terms of like Abrahamic worldviews are just where the spirits of the dead go anyway. Why are there reserved ghost heavens and ghost hells, and how the hell does that work? But like, That's probably just Wally being stupid, but just like the idea of ghost heaven and ghost hell as opposed to regular heaven and regular hell when the ghost is already a dead spirit is absurd. And I haven't decided if I think it's funny or not. I think it's funny. I think it's probably funny. The fact that I don't know is the funniest thing. And then the finale of this movie is so many different bizarre curveballs. It's like you've got the wholesome ending. There's like a very like underwhelmingly goofy disposal of the antagonist. And then Santa Claus shows up and fucking like disintegrates Jessica. Wally lives miserably ever after, and that's the end of the movie. And it's just such a fucking hard left turn. I was kind of getting sucked into the cheesy sweetness of it, so it was really jarring, but the fact that it's so out of the blue is really funny, and it's very in keeping with the sense of humor of Steve's other films that I've seen. Character-wise, Wally is a police officer. I am not overly fond of police officers. At the beginning of the movie, like, the antagonist who's luring Wally in is just, like, looking at a headline is just, like, cop, hero. Absolutely not. Like, all cops are bastards. Like, she says that. And it's just like, yes, except you're a villain and this is probably the hero. But it's just like, I can't believe I'm about to use the word nuance while talking about this movie because, like, don't get me wrong. This is the broadest humor in the world. Like, the humor in this movie is as broad as possible. And the acting style for all of the characters, especially Wally, is the broadest comedic acting you're going to see anywhere. But I love that they make it clear that Wally is a guy with good intentions, but he fucks a lot of things up because he's incredibly incompetent. Like, he wants to do good things, but he's very stupid and oblivious and therefore probably not a great police officer. And also, he's kind of aware, but also not aware of his privilege. But he explicitly says that he's doing the police thing by abusing the system multiple times. Like, one of his first lines when he gets to this movie's Amityville house is like, "Oh, I'm not a hero. I just did what any police officer would do. I protect the innocent. I help people, abuse my power. You know, usual police stuff." And like, there's a mixture of like, Wally is legitimately a nice person and possibly even a good-hearted person, but he's still a police officer who does abuse his power in ways that directly benefit him. He's a little bit self-serving, and he's very oblivious and stupid, and I think those things are balanced very well in terms of him being an actual likable, enjoyable to watch protagonist while also being an ass. And I was actually impressed that, like, Steve is playing Wally with the same broad humor as he plays the pizza delivery guy in the original Carousel, who is my favorite part of that movie, by the way, because I also want to just get paid for delivering you pizza and leave. Like, and everybody just wants to have sex with him, and he's just like, I want my money and I want to leave. But that's not the point of this review. The point is, Wally and the pizza delivery guy are played with the same over the top humor. They're played by the same person without a lot of like aesthetic difference between the two. It's a lot of what seems to me like just Steve being Steve and having fun. There is enough like background to both characters that they do feel like distinctly different people in a lot of ways. Like, pizza delivery guy is a struggling pizza delivery guy, and he does like completely misread situations and doesn't understand when people want to have sex with him because he's so single-mindedly focused on pizza. Whereas Wally does have that similar kind of obliviousness, but he's more of like a just like overly sweet but kind of privileged, selfish goofball. And a lot of that is me maybe reading into the characters, but they have fleshed out enough backgrounds that they feel like different characters, and it works. Like, the acting style and the actor are very similar, but the characters are different enough that they felt like different people, and I liked that. I liked that Steve was able to play two different characters in a fairly similar way without them feeling like the same character. The person who is leasing the house to Wally is named Samantha Swanson, and she is very much the obvious over-the-top melodramatic villain who's very sweet and inviting and is just like, please come in. I definitely don't want to kill you. And at first I was like, maybe the actor's not playing this up enough. Like, I feel like you could really play the obvious I want to kill you up to the hilt, given how over the top Steve's performance as Wally is. But like, as the movie goes on, Samantha really leans into that, and like, it's a really good over the top melodramatic villain performance. Like, I had gripes at first, but like, for one thing, Samantha doesn't get a huge amount of screen time, but when Samantha gets screen time, she's an excellent melodramatic villain. And then going back to Wally, like, there's a whole montage of him in the Amityville house just like goofing off and doing deliberately childish things, like jumping on a bed while eating snacks and like sitting on the stairs and bumping down the steps and like just running around in his pajamas eating snack food. And it's just very clearly like an excuse for Steve to just have fun and goof off, which is like super valid and super entertaining to watch. The only gripe I have is that the bed that he's jumping on has a running ceiling fan above it, and he's jumping so fucking close to that ceiling fan. And I was just like, look, I get that you're having fun with this, but dude, you're gonna get your head sliced into a million little pieces if you don't either jump a little bit lower or turn off that ceiling fan, because holy shit. The one other character I did want to touch on is Creighton Spook, who is the owner of the Spirit Snaggers, who I mentioned before, who is brought in to take care of Jessica. And he's just not a super prevalent character, but he's like the very obvious, like, burly, brooding hero detective guy. And honestly, he's just got this super deep, gravelly voice that is very pleasant to listen to. Like, it's just, dude has a great voice, and it's a fun comedic performance, especially because it's a lot more sort of dark and brooding and serious, but still kind of over the top. And I love the way it's played against Wally. But mostly, I just wanted to comment on how deep and amazing the dude's voice is. And then also, I loved the eccentric paranormal consultant, especially because immediately after the consultation, he's like, "Thank you for this one-time consultation. Now, please pay the one-time consultation fee of $5,000. And then Wally's like, $5,000? And then they never speak of it again for the rest of the movie. Oh, and there is one other character I wanted to talk about who is in the movie for so little time that he's practically a cameo, but God, if it isn't delightful. Jessica's like, "Oh, yeah, I can just call up my friend." And Wally's like, "You have a cell phone?" And she's like, "Yeah. All the ghosts get them at orientation." And she pulls out her phone and she's just like, "Dude, can you come over here and help us out with this?" And then immediately next to Wally, this like very tacky looking Grim Reaper appears and he freaks the fuck out. And then Jessica and Reaper looking guy are like, "Calm down." And Jessica's like, "Wally, I want you to meet my friend, the Ghost of Christmas Future." Ghost of Christmas Future is literally just there to tell Wally that he's going to be totally fine. He's going to be able to get Jessica out of there because he's going to badly lie and then tase Creighton Spook and then run away. And then he's just like, "I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm an impeccable liar." And then Creighton Spook shows up. He shows a piece of paper that just says permit on it, and he's just like, "See, I have a permit," and he badly lies, then tases Creighton Spook, and then they get the fuck out of there. And again, it's very broad, obvious humor. All the actors makes it funny, and the fact that they just bring in Ghost of Christmas Future to do that one thing is the funniest shit in the world to me. And effects-wise, this movie is a lot more light on special effects than other stuff I've seen because it is less outright horror gore fest. As a matter of fact, there isn't really a single gore effect in the film, whereas Carousel and Carousel the Second really put a lot of money into, we want to do this batshit crazy plot line, but with as much legitimately great looking gore as we can possibly put in this thing. This is definitely a lot more stripped down and just goofy, but there is some makeup work going on with the ghosts, particularly Jessica, and it looks nice. That might be more of a costuming and like face paint type deal, but it is still to some extent a visual and makeup effects thing, and it looks nice. And also, there are some painfully obvious digital effects in this, including fake snow and a very badly composited decoy Amityville house, because you have, like, on the poster for the movie, you've got like a bunch of snow and a wreath on what looks like the Amityville house from Amityville Horror. And like it looks like that's the house that Wally's going to be staying at. And he's just like, this place looks dark and full of unspeakable horror. And it looks like anybody who might go in is never going to tell the tale. And it like cuts back to, again, the badly composited digital Amityville house, and the score is going crazy with darkness. And then Wally's just like, it's a good thing I'm staying at that house. And it goes over to the other house. And like, we do find out that there's also murders that have happened there. But the paranormal consultant at the movie is just like, you're staying at the second most notorious house in Amityville. And that was fun. But the point is, there is a badly composited version of the Amityville house from Amityville Horror. It's probably like a piece of digital art, but it looks like shit and I love it. All in all, it is pretty much exactly what I expected out of a low-budget horror comedy called Amityville Christmas Vacation, especially because I'm familiar with Steve's style, and in the context of me feeling honored that I had that screener shared with me, and like knowing Steve and Steve's sense of humor through two of his other movies and interacting with him online. Like, I'm a little bit biased. I can only view the film within the context of that prior knowledge. And if I didn't have that context, I feel like I would have been harder on this film, but honestly, not that much harder, because it is just a really campy, cute, silly little movie, and I had fun with it. And I feel like if your expectations aren't high for this, and you know that it's an incredibly low budget, deliberately silly movie, and you just want something to throw on and watch with friends during the holiday season that has some absurd spookiness to it, I definitely do recommend it. And you can find this streaming for free with ads on Tubi. It is also available to rent on Amazon Prime and probably a few other places. I know Steve also has his own streaming service called Steve Buster that has all of his stuff. I will try to provide links to places where you can watch the movie, but Steve's production company, Silver Spotlight, has also put out Blu-rays of this movie. And all of that happened after I got the screener. Like, I got the screener before the movie was publicly available, which made me feel special, but I didn't watch it until today, but like, the screener was still special. So thank you, Steve. But the point is, the movie is out there. You should go watch it. That is my review of Amityville Christmas Vacation. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!